You're listening to a Frequency Podcast Network production.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
This is the Brock and Dalby Podcast.
Welcome to Wednesday. My name is Brock.
I'm Dalby.
I don't know if you saw this story. In Waterloo, there was a guy who called the cops because he thought there was suspicious drone activity in his neighborhood.
Thanks, Obama.
I guess when he was sleeping, they kept hearing, banging on the roof.
Oh.
And he kept thinking it was drones that were landing, and there was a few other neighbors claiming they were hearing the same thing.
Damn.
So once the police investigated the situation, they determined that it was just bird shit.
Come on. Really?
They examined the bird dookie, and it turns out that it was just a heron that was flying around the neighborhood, pooping on everyone's house.
Hang on now. Hang on. Because I see you're trying to be one of them bird apologists, trying to explain that birds aren't real. So when he says a drone is dropping stuff on his house, you go, oh, it's just a heron. That's a drone, brother. That's not a real thing.
I wonder how stupid this guy felt when the cops finally called him back and they're like, hey, so yeah, it's just bird shit.
Oh, because you got to imagine, it was probably happening for long enough that he was like, I can't take it anymore. Probably did some minor investigating himself and finally was like, I'm going to the authorities. Something suspicious is going on here. And for them to just be like, yeah, birds fly and also shit sometimes, so not much we can do about it. Sometimes cops have to work on some really hard stuff.
Right. To be the guy that had to go up on the roof and be like, for fuck's sakes, man.
People like to talk about firefighters have to go get cats out of trees sometimes and that's not what you dreamed of when you were a kid. But yeah, to be the cop who's got to go investigate bird shit on your roof.
It's a shitty job, but someone's got to do it,
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
Very excited in our household for tomorrow. A brand new Mario Party game is coming out.
Why are you excited about that? Doesn't that just mean there's going to be a huge fight amongst the family?
Well, sorry, I should say my kids are very excited because they're not necessarily the most self-aware people. They're the ones that are going to fight. Mallory and I, we play video games and we can be a little fun competitive between ourselves. But I predict by about tomorrow, 6 p.m., someone will be crying over a lost or stolen star.
Me and my sister were not allowed to play Mario Party growing up together because it always just ended up in us just yelling at each other and hitting each other.
The thing is, too, is it's such a classic game. They've made these for, I think, since the Super Nintendo, or maybe the Nintendo 64. They go back.
Generations of siblings have been fighting each other over this game.
And from time immemorial, they're also just terrible for the controllers. Basically, you're mashing and smashing on the buttons, spinning the joysticks, and then inevitably throwing them at a wall, the floor, or each other.
Yeah.
And now you got to pay $80 to replace Nintendo joysticks again.
Yeah, it's rated E for everyone, but it shouldn't be, honestly.
It's just so funny. There used to be a whole market for commercials that would show family game night. That was the big thing. Mom, dad, the two kids, the dog would all sit around the table and they would show these great clips of them playing board games, and the dad would give a little shot in the arm to the kid, you old scamp, and they'd have fun, and everyone was in love, and it was no part of those commercials was real life.
Not in my house. I don't know if we ever actually finished a full game of Monopoly before growing up.
Oh, absolutely
Before
not.
someone spazzed out.
Monopoly is really the truest sign of your family's falling apart. Is because Monopoly normally will end in hurt feelings and just a sort of general feel of upset.
Lack of trust, too, with whoever's playing the banker and whatnot.
Right. But if your family's really on the rocks, there's no way you're getting to the end of that game. Accusations, shouting, screaming, probably crying. Someone's going to flip the board at some point.
Milton Bradley needs to come out with board games that have a guarantee of a family, free fight.
I don't think there is such a thing, though. I knew a family back when I was in high school in the territories that had to ban Twister from the house.
I get that, man, because you start blaming people. You're you're being shady, dude. Stop.
You're blocking me from the Reds. Yeah. I can't get my left hand on red.
Stop being an offensive lineman out here and just let me touch a circle, dude.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
What board game or game in general do you think causes the most arguments?
Battleship by far. They're all a bunch of friggin' liars and cheaters.
It is one of those things where, like, you call out a few shots and everything's feeling fine, and then you're like, wait, mathematically, there's no way I have missed this many times.
Yeah, it's a game of trust, literally.
Yeah, and you can't trust anybody because everybody's a piece of shit. I hate Battleship.
All fair in love and war, is that what they say?
Whatever, I guess. Now I'm pissed off already. I'm not even playing today.
Battleship ruined your day.
We sunk his battleship, bro. Have a good one, buddy.
Cheers, boy.
A lot of people also texting in about Uno. Dude, you get that Uno reverse card drawn on you?
Dude. When you play Uno, I need to know this about you as a person. Do you stack +2s? Like, if I play a +2, can you play a +2 to make it +4 to me?
I'll stack it if you're stacking.
All right, so let's just say that once you get up to about a +8, you're about to find out if your relationship can stand the test of time.
Yeah.
You get hit by a +8 by your significant other, and you can still go to bed, like, looking at one another, you're going to be okay.
You know, there is a difference between playing, like, board games and games as a family versus as a couple. I do feel like, looking back on it now, like, as a kid, it's almost a setup that your parents are like, oh, we know we can get them to bed earlier because they're going to freak out.
Right. As soon as one of you starts flipping out in the game of life, all right, that's it. Get to your room, go to bed early tonight.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a couples game, You can't really just, like, up and walk away from the board.
Yo, couples game nights aren't as fun as they sound because, you know what? I am proud of my relationship with Courtney that
Sure.
It's like we are so in sync when we have couples game nights. But I've played with some other couples where, you know, they're having an argument in the car ride home.
Dude, what's that clip from The Simpsons where Milhouse's parents are trying to play Pictionary together?
Pictionary kills couples, man. Where you're like, how are you not on the same page as me?
Pictionary, what's the other one? Charades is another one. Any game that requires a couple to be on that same wavelength, and then it just becomes this huge expose on, like, turns out you guys don't know each other nearly as well as you thought.
I've seen many of nights ruined by the game, that Heads Up game.
Oh, where you got to guess what's on your headband?
Yeah.
Yeah, that game will break a couple,
So
man.
you guys are engaged, really? All right, bud.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
Disappointed watching the baseball game last night, not because the Yankees won or anything, but because they didn't have those creepy people sitting behind home plate smiling. Did you see that the other night at the Dodgers game?
From the movie, right? They're making another one of those Smile movies?
Yeah, so there's a movie called Smile 2, and they actually did this a few years ago during the World Series, where they had these people promoting the movie, and they just sit behind home plate throughout the entire game in these bright like fluorescent shirts with the creepiest grin that like a menacing smile that you've ever seen.
Ear to ear, almost like Joker-esque, bared teeth and everything. Like someone looks like they're on drugs.
If you haven't seen it, text SMILE to 762-555, or we'll throw it in the podcast links later. I would hate to be sitting beside these people the entire game.
Oh, well, and they put them, like, because for marketing purposes, they want them seen as much as possible. So they're right behind home plate of Major League Baseball playoff games. Those tickets are not cheap. And you, as the normal person, paid all that money to sit next to someone, and all the best you can hope for is that they're promoting a movie and that they're not actually going to murder you.
Imagine trying to explain that to your kid, though. They wouldn't understand that. What is this creepy guy doing?
Dad, what is that man doing? Why is he smiling like that?
And watching it on TV, like, they're dead in the view, so it distracts you from watching the game. It's very menacing, like I said. But I wonder what the protocol is for that. Like, how do they hire these people? Were they, like, Craigslist actors or something? Are they paid to keep the creepy smile from beginning to end of game? Can they take any breaks?
Right, yeah. Like, because they're so front and center, they're basically always on camera while they're in their seats. Can you catch them slipping? Can they, like, hey, sixth inning, feel free to, like, relax your
Are they allowed to
face?
partake in the seventh inning stretch?
Doing the wave, but while doing the murder smile? That's terrifying.
But even, like, are they allowed to go to the bathroom?
Oh.
Can they break character for a second? Because, like, if you know anything about Dodgers fans, some of them are pretty,
aggressive.
yeah.
They're aggressive.
To say the least. If you go into the men's washroom with that grin on your face,
right,
you're going to get knocked the hell out, man.
I would assume that you have to use a stall. Like, if the contract states that you have to be smiling the entire time you're in public view, even if you're just peeing, you go sit in the stall. Maybe you don't even have to go to the bathroom. You're just like, oh my God, my face hurts so much.
Yeah, but if I'm peeing at the urinal and I look over at you and I'm like, what are you smiling at? And you're like, oh, I'm just promoting a movie. I'm like, what did you just say?
You should promote this, brother.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
I got a text in from friend of the show, George. He says, what makes a smile so creepy? Is it too much teeth? I don't know if it's really the teeth or the smile itself. I think it's the eyes.
Yeah.
Is honestly what makes the smile creepy.
I think it's if the smile is too wide, like if it goes full ear to ear, it just feels like that's not natural. People don't naturally smile that hard without, like, they're either laughing or talking. But the eyes really do. If the eyes don't match the smile, if they're not giving across that same I'm really happy feeling.
It's all body language stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you give someone a wink, it can either be like, hey, see you later, wink, or it's see you later.
Wink, yeah.
Right?
A wink can have a lot of different connotations. It can be like, hey, this is something between you and me. It can be like, hey, I'm making a joke. I'm implying something.
Sure.
I have something in my eye.
Well, let's get real. Everybody uses the winky emoji way more than they would actually wink at people.
Oh, I have digitally winked infinitely more times than I have winked in real life.
Think about all the stuff that you've texted and if you actually winked at someone when you said it. Like, in a more, like, sexual nature.
Yeah.
I don't think the wink works as well as we think it does, like, through text.
Right, you're like setting up a date with somebody, you're kind of being flirty, you're sending winks back and forth. Now imagine you're sitting at the dinner table, you're across from one another, just winking at each other. Like, no, you'd think the person across from you is having a stroke.
Can't wait to see you tonight.
What is that supposed to mean? Why'd you wink at me like that?
Even just think about the emojis that people use on a regular basis if you use those in real life. Like, you know when someone says something cheeky and they'll use that one where it's like a half wink with the tongue sticking out, that kind of face.
Yeah.
Like if I said something jokey to you and I was just like all the time.
I mean, even one of the most classic, before they were emojis, they were emoticons, and they were just letters next to, like, colons and stuff. Colon P. Like, the idea that you're just sticking your tongue out at somebody. Sure, if you're like 14, maybe even 10.
You might think I'm having a stroke or something.
If I'm 40 years old and I'm like, like, what, are you good?
Imagine being on a date and it's like, want to take this back to my place, and you pull your eggplant out.
What are you cooking?
I'm talking about the literal vegetable too, by the way.
Dicing this thing up? What am I supposed to do with this now?
Start spraying water everywhere.
You're just making a mess.
This is the Brock and Dalby Podcast.
Me and you are going to be taking some time off coming up in November here. And I'm thinking that with some of that time off, me and the family, we're going to do a little trip down stateside.
Nice,
a little
nice.
exploring. And we're going to a part of New York where there is a diner. And I'm not saying where it is, because I don't want more people going to it. It's one of those little hole-in-the-wall diner places that gets a decent amount of people. And the food, magic. It's so good.
Now, does it have the checkered floors?
Dude, that's the first thing I spotted when we walked in. It's the first time we went to this place. We were just looking for a place to eat. Hey, that place looks all right. You walk across the threshold, and it's immediate checkerboard, black and white floors. And I'm just like, oh, this is going to be good.
That's always a good sign. Yeah.
I don't know what it is, man. It's like, it almost feels like there's a rule. Like a diner inspector comes by once every 6 months, and if your food's not up to snuff, they take the checkerboard floors away.
And the lady that's serving your food has got to be like pretty old as well, too.
Oh, absolutely.
She's got to call you honey or sweetie or something like that.
Gotta call you hun. And if this was a different era, she'd probably have a Marlboro hanging off her lip. You know what I mean?
I will say another sign that you know you're going to get like the best food of your life is when you go somewhere and they've got those classic menu signs that are either Coca-Cola or Pepsi.
Dude, this place got Coca-Cola everything. Coca-Cola mini jukeboxes on each table.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola memorabilia, lunchbox, hubcaps, all that stuff all across the walls. And I'm not necessarily a big Coca-Cola guy. But again, it's just one of those things that if you walk into a retro diner-style restaurant and it's got those old, like, Coke bottles and stuff on the wall, you're like, people have been leaving 5-star reviews here for decades.
I think another sign of a dope restaurant is if they have, like, the actual Coke hardware itself, where it's, like, the cup is, like, those, those Coca-Cola glasses.
Yeah.
Either that, Or I call them the Pizza Hut cups.
Pizza Hut cups with they're just,
you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. They start out narrow. They bulb up at the top. They're
like
kind of
those
frosted.
red. Yeah. That is the sign that a restaurant knows what they're doing, man. I don't know why, but the drink always tastes way better in those things.
Especially if then you look across the restaurant and you see that the fountain pop machine is self-serve. You're just like, I'm going to swamp water this immediately. I'm going to get every flavor in my big red cup.
If you've got all of that, you've got a recipe for a banging meal, dude.
Absolutely. You are about to have a culinary experience like no other.
And then it's got to be, if you're going in, the food that they have for the pictures, those pictures that were like taken in the 80s or the 90s.
It's like the first pictures taken after color film. You're just like, okay, they haven't changed the menu. They haven't changed the food. They haven't felt the need to update the look.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I'm going to get.
Good restaurants and a good real estate agent always have old photos.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
I think the older the better, honestly.
I will agree with that. Whether it's in the kitchen or front of house, people who've been there for like 20, 30 years, there's love in that building.
I'll also say, if you're getting like a Chinese food or something like that, and they're absolutely rude as hell to you, you're going to get some of the best Chinese food you ever had.
Isn't that the weirdest thing? But it's so true that if you go in and you're like, yeah, can I get a...
And the guy looks pissed off at you the whole time.
Come on, I got a line behind you. Just, give me a number 3.
It's the same thing with pizza, honestly, sometimes. If you go in and you got an Italian dude that's like, what you want? Like, all right, yeah.
See, on the other side of Italian, though, if you go into a place and it's got like the old tomato cans and like pasta containers like glued onto the back of the booths and the dividers and stuff like that, this place could probably use some renovations.
Sometimes, but if it's mama's sauce and you know that for a fact,
that's different.
I'll say the same thing with an Italian restaurant. If you go in and they got those red carpets on the floor that look like they haven't been cleaned in a long time, that's a sign where you're like, is there blood in there? Is there cigarettes? Like, what is it?
You're starting to ask, were these red when they were installed?
Well, did the mafia used to hang out here? Right?
Speaking of red, someone texted this in. If the place serves fries in a red basket with the paper inside.
Oh, hell yeah, dude.
Those fries are going to hit like no other. Those are top tier fries.
Someone said if they have a as seen on TV before, and I will say that's not always true because it's like, if Guy Fieri's been there, then it's probably good.
Right, yeah. If it's as seen on like diners, dive-ins, and drives.
But if Gordon Ramsay has been to the restaurant you're going to, there's a good chance it's probably not for a good reason.
It's still as seen on TV, but it's not as promising as it could have been.
I don't know if I've ever seen a restaurant promote that they were on Hell's Kitchen before or anything like that.
Kitchen Nightmares,
yeah.
Bar Rescue.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like being on Tinder. Like, do you say that I was on Cops once?
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
Researchers in China are now working on a flexible finger-like probe with sensors on the end that they think could be the future of doing prostate exams.
I've had some time to think about this, and I actually think that I'm on board in this situation. I know your feelings on robots. You don't trust them. But the most uncomfortable part of a prostate exam is knowing that there is a person attached to the finger.
But also some of the best, medical things is when you get that human connection with someone.
I don't think in this situation that's true. I don't think it's the same thing. They're talking about putting tiny sensors inside the probe, which could actually use the surrounding area to take readings and stuff. The human finger can't do that.
My thing is, how many times in life does technology break down on us? That thing gets stuck,
Well, I think you just have to, as long as it's built in a certain way, it should be extractable.
Or how unnerving would it be to, drop your drawers and before they do it, the, technician or whatever is like, we just got to spray a little WD-40 on this.
Instead of lubricant.
That's straight nightmare fuel, dude.
This is the Brock and Dalby Podcast.
A British woman has tried to sue her former employer because she says she didn't get a farewell card when she left. She claims it is a failure to acknowledge her existence.
What? Get the hell out of here.
Now, in court, her former colleagues testified, check this out, that they did, in fact, buy her a card.
Oh.
But the only reason they didn't give it to her is only 3 people signed it.
Damn. no one wanted to say goodbye.
The judge just threw out the case after that.
Well,
which also, I don't really know what the case is that you felt like, I don't know, bummed out that nobody
emotional
liked you?
distress, I guess, would be the claim.
Also, but I mean, this is worst case scenario. You just found out that everyone at your job actually hated you.
You should have all said goodbye to me. And it's like, yeah, it turns out only 3 people in the whole company didn't hate your guts.
Well, and let's get real. When there's those like going away cards, I mean, most of us are like, all right.
Anytime a card comes across my desk, I don't even read what it's for. I just write, "You did it," with an exclamation point and send it along.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
We learned through a recent interview that apparently Ozzy Osbourne, of all people, potentially could have joined Van Halen back in 2001.
I can't picture it. Like him out in like the Van Halen style with the tight pants and stuff like that, especially because this was, what did you say, 2001? Mm-hmm. Like Ozzy was already, this is the era of Ozzy on the Osbournes, the TV show. He was already getting a little bit old. Not that Van Halen was super young at the time,
sure.
But like, I just trying to picture him running around on stage doing songs like Jump. I just can't wrap my head around
I
it.
did put an Ozzy voice into our AI thing.
Oh.
And this is what I got.
And nothing gets me down.
Okay.
You got it tough. I've seen the toughest around.
Huh.
It kind of works.
And I know.
I love the AI
Baby,
warbles.
just how you feel.
I guess it's not as weird. It's still weird. I'm going to say it's still
But it's
weird.
not too far-fetched.
It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Okay, let's hear it.
Against the wrecking machine. I ain't the worst that you'd see.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
How can't you see what I mean? Ow, might as well jump.
It could have worked.
It does sound a little bit like Ozzy doing karaoke, but you're right. With the proper actual production, maybe we did miss out on something special.
There's some weird Doctor Strange universe where Ozzy is the front man of Van Halen.
Van Osborne.
Van Osborne.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
I decided to try it out with Running with the Devil.
Running with the devil.
Okay, it's definitely AI.
When he tries to do the David Lee Roth scream.
Those are normally notes only Sharon gets to hear.
Oh, God. And then I was just thinking, what if Ozzy joined other bands?
Okay, now we're really going on.
Maybe like Limp Bizkit with Ozzy Experience. You ready for this one?
Sure. Early 2000s Ozzy doing Nookie would have been amazing.
I could have seen this happening at an Ozfest back in the day.
Family Values Tour?
Or maybe I was thinking, he just goes in a whole different direction and joins Right Said Fred.
I'm too sexy for your party. Too sexy for your party. No way I'm disco dancing.
Oh, God.
I'm a model. You know what I mean?
Just young, shirtless Ozzy in the leather pants walking down a catwalk.
He's in one of those mesh shirts.
Star-shaped sunglasses on.
And I know Ozzy's not big on like the cover songs, but I mean,
Sure.
I was just thinking that, they call him the Prince of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he could be a genie too.
Sir.
My body's saying let's go. But my heart is saying no.
Oh.
It kind of works though. You can't deny that.
I will say that it works in the context of it fits with the song.
It does feel weird hearing him say you gotta rub me the right way.
This truly is the darkest timeline if we get Ozzy singing Genie in a bottle.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
The Brock and Dalby Podcast.
Calgary Hitmen, the WHL hockey team, have a new jersey that they're promoting and a big wrestling event coming up. They do this every year.
That's the team that, I don't know if Bret Hart still owns it, but
I think he's still got a stake in it, but I don't think it's as big as it used to be. But I just love the idea of taking something in the real world and naming a sports team after it outside of like your typical assortment of birds, which is generally most teams.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I was thinking, could we come up with a list of band names that would have also made great sports team names?
I did play against a beer league team in a tournament one time that wore the Limp Bizkits.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me the helmets were all red.
They all had red helmets.
God, that's just the best. That's a team that you can get behind. Like, it's cool when your local team has, like, a cool name and logo and all that stuff. But when they're doing something silly, that's when it's really good. Like, imagine, we all know, despite the whole Utah experiment, Gary Bettman's going to try and put hockey back in the desert for some reason. What if this time they're the Arizona Oasis and they get the Gallagher brothers with all this money they make on this tour to be part of the ownership group?
And all they're known for getting is fights. I can picture the logo now. It's just that weird haircut that Liam Gallagher used to have, like an outline of that.
Or like, think back to like some classic bands. Classic bands had classic names that I think could really work. Like, imagine the Cars as a team name. You know what I mean? Like the Calgary Cars would be a great baseball team name.
Sure.
The Winnipeg White Snakes.
One of the new women's hockey league teams is just Jesse's Girls.
Again, you're going to draw a crowd. Even if the game's not good, people are going to be like, you want to go see Jesse's Girl tonight? Yeah, let's grab some tickets to go see Jesse's Girl. Or we can stop by and see the Def Leopards.
The Def Leopards could actually work pretty well, yeah.
Also, I think Blur would make a great team name and would help add to the trivia question of how many sports teams are there that don't end in S. Mm-hmm. The Blur would be a great basketball team name.
Yeah.
Watching them go up and down. Or lacrosse. It's so fast.
I mean, a good baseball team name would be the American Idiots, honestly.
Oh, even just the Green Day would be great. But American Idiots would be fantastic. You'd have to be in Canada, though, right? Like, I feel like if you named your American baseball team...
No, I think the Washington Nationals, like, minor league team.
Is the American Idiots?
Yeah. It's a great marketing idea, honestly.
I love the idea of doing, like, a parent team and a farm team, like, having them tied together. Like, even you could do the Guns and their farm team, the Roses.
Yeah.
And have people traveling back and forth all the time. That would be fantastic.
For more Brock and Dalby, tune in weekday mornings 5:30 to 9.
The Brock and Dalby podcast is brought to you by badshop.ca, the Brock and Dalby merch store. With all proceeds going to the Canadian Cancer Society.